In the fading shadows of the Middle Ages, long before gunpowder shaped the future of warfare, there existed a weapon so mysterious, so devastating, and so politically dangerous that entire kingdoms worked relentlessly to bury every trace of it. Its story was scattered across forbidden manuscripts, fragmented battle reports, and the whispered fears of chroniclers who knew better than to speak openly. But the truth, buried under centuries of silence, reveals that this weapon did more than shatter armies. It fractured alliances, rewrote borders, and nearly triggered a collapse of medieval order itself. To understand why this weapon was so feared, we must return to a Europe that was not yet fully formed. Castles were rising, kings were consolidating their fragile power, and every noble family was desperately trying to secure its future. Warfare in this era was slow, predictable, and often ceremonial. Battles relied on heavily armored knights, tight shield walls, longbows from skilled archers, and siege machines whose designs had barely changed in centuries. Everyone believed the rules of war were fixed, timeless pillars holding together an unstable world. Then something appeared that was not supposed to exist. It began quietly along the borders of the Holy Roman Empire around the early 12th century. Small rumors at first, the kind that traveled on the lips of merchants and wandering clergy. Stories of soldiers cut down without any visible blade, of armor split open as though struck by invisible force, of attacks launched over distances so great that even the best longbowmen could not explain them. Chroniclers began to mention a silent thunder, a phrase so strange that many historians assumed it was metaphorical. But the pattern repeated. In 3 separate engagements, entire formations collapsed in seconds, and survivors spoke of the same thing. A flash, a piercing crack, and the sickening realization that men were dying before they even reached the field of battle. Most believed it was an exaggeration, until the Battle of Stauffen. There are few events in medieval history as shrouded in contradiction as that battle. Official reports were sanitized, rewritten, and censored. But the private letters of a Benedictine monk by the name of Lambert, who witnessed it from the hilltop monastery, reveal a more chilling description. He wrote of soldiers falling as though pierced by rays of light, of the smell of burning metal, and of commanders who fled not from enemy steel, but from something they could not understand. Lambert wrote, "Some force tore the sky open like a wound, and from it came a kind of spear fashioned of wind and fire." Scholars later dismissed this, but the consistency with other accounts is staggering. What the armies faced that day was not divine, nor was it supernatural. It was technological. Hidden inside a reinforced wooden frame, mounted on wheels and protected by layers of treated leather to mask its shape, was a device that fired projectiles using a mixture far more explosive than mere black powder. Something far more refined, far more efficient, and far ahead of its time. Modern reconstructions suggest a compound capable of launching hardened metal bolts at speeds unreachable by traditional torsion or tension mechanisms. A single discharge could penetrate plate armor. A volley could destroy entire cavalry charges, and unlike longbows, it required no master archer, just a trained operator. The weapon was known by only one name, the Vox Tempestatis, the voice of the storm. Its existence posed a direct threat not just to enemy armies, but to the entire medieval hierarchy. Feudal power relied on predictable warfare. Knights on horseback were the symbol of elite dominance. Castles were symbols of wealth. Archery required lifelong training, ensuring control remained in the hands of specialized forces. But the Vox Tempestatis shattered this system. It made armor meaningless. It made castles vulnerable. And most dangerously, it democratized power. Anyone with access to the weapon could hold their ground against elite forces. The first faction to secretly deploy it was a coalition of minor lords along the Swabian frontier. They were tired of being crushed under imperial authority. Their lands were taxed relentlessly, their sons taken for the emperor's wars, and their autonomy slowly stripped away. The creation of such a weapon wasn't accidental. It was born from desperation, political suffocation, and the rising fear that the old order was tightening its grip. They funded groups of early alchemists, engineers, and renegade siege masters. They built workshops hidden beneath old fortifications, disguised as grain storehouses or well houses. For years, they refined a mixture that burned hotter, faster, and more violently than anything known in Europe. When they unveiled it, they believed it would bring them freedom. But power, once revealed, never remains in the hands of the first who wield it. Word spread quickly. Spies brought sketches of the device to rival kingdoms. Some dismissed it, others feared it deeply. The Church, however, reacted with unprecedented speed. A secret council convened in Mainz issued a prohibition that remains one of the least known but most severe bans in medieval history. They declared that any instrument capable of tearing flesh with fire-borne force was an abomination, a violation of natural law, and a challenge to divine authority. Possession of the Vox Tempestatis became grounds for execution. The workshops were burned, the alchemists were hunted, and the minor lords who funded the weapon were either forced to submit or mysteriously disappeared. But the weapon itself refused to die. Fragments continued appearing in unexpected places. The ruins of a workshop beneath an abbey in Alsace, a coded diagram hidden in a Templar manuscript, the testimony of a Bohemian metallurgist who claimed to have refined the storm mixture, and even the destroyed remains of a cartwheel reinforced in a way that matched Lambert's description. Each piece suggested that the weapon was not a single device, but a technological lineage, passed in secret, modified in shadows, evolving as its creators tried to stay a step ahead of the authorities. The most compelling evidence emerges from the siege of Rupture in 1134. Chroniclers insisted that the castle fell to starvation, but the excavation conducted in the 1990s uncovered metal fragments embedded deep in stone walls, fragments that show patterns of high-velocity impact unknown in that period. Something had struck those stones with force far beyond any medieval siege weapon, and the penetration marks align not with catapult stones or ballista bolts, but with a projectile traveling at impossible speed. The defenders must have witnessed something terrifying, because after the fall, the entire garrison vanished from records. No survivors, no prisoners, no graves. The ruling powers realized something. If this knowledge continued spreading, warfare would change forever. Europe would descend into an arms race centuries before its time. The Church feared losing moral authority. Kings feared losing military superiority. And guilds feared losing control of their crafts. So they agreed, quietly, off record, to erase the technology. Manuscripts referencing it were confiscated. Smiths suspected of working on variants were arrested. Alchemical recipes involving high combustion compounds were labeled heretical. Even battlefield reports containing unusual injuries were rewritten. For a time, the weapon succeeded in disappearing, but complete erasure is impossible. It remains in the margins of forbidden texts, the odd sketches in monastic codices, the unexplained scars on excavated armor, and the haunting letters of monks like Lambert, who swore they saw something that defied their age. What makes the story even more compelling is that historians now believe that the Vox Tempestatis was more sophisticated than gunpowder weapons that appeared centuries later. In other words, medieval Europe might have accidentally created an early prototype of ballistic technology, then panicked and destroyed it before it could reshape the world. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how the weapon worked, but how close it came to altering the entire course of history. One army equipped with the Vox Tempestatis could break the military dominance of knights overnight. Castles, once symbols of invincibility, would have become obsolete. Feudalism itself, rooted in militarized hierarchy, may have collapsed far earlier. Europe may have industrialized sooner. Empires might have risen or fallen decades ahead of schedule. But instead, fear triumphed over innovation, and the world remained bound to the pace of tradition. The final layer of secrecy involves one last discovery: a parchment found in 1872 in the private collection of a Bavarian noble family. It describes a weapon tested in a remote valley, its power equal to the wrath of the heavens. The document ends with a chilling line: "Let this knowledge die with us, for should it survive, so will war without restraint." Was this a warning? A confession? Or evidence that someone managed to preserve a final blueprint? We may never know. But one thing is certain: the weapon they tried to erase from history almost changed everything. And if this was the first medieval technology capable of rewriting the world, what else was hidden? Some historians believe this weapon might be connected to another mystery: the sudden appearance of an unknown engineering guild in the late 12th century, one rumored to have created machines so advanced that kings fought not for land, but for the craftsmen themselves. Their legacy vanished too, nearly without a trace. But that is a story for another time. If you want to explore that mystery next, all you need to do is stay with us. The medieval world hid more than we ever imagined, and we are just beginning to uncover it. See you here on the channel for another fantastic medieval story.